Second row, Brady.
Troublemakers in the back row, we're all.
We're almost ready.
There once was a pastor who, and I'll more to follow.
Oh dear.
I don't know. Well, I don't know where to go from there.
I was gonna say, I don't know how you're gonna make that.
Give me one.
I think we can bring names down in our.
Well,
Oh, really? Okay.
it's like the first line in the 41st chapter of the book of Genesis. It came to pass.
It came to pass.
Which brings us to this.
Very good.
41st chapter of the book of Genesis. I welcome you to that study this morning. This is a jam-packed chapter in a remarkable book. So let us begin it with these words. And it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river, and behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine and flat-fleshed, and they fed in a meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and stood by the other kine upon the bank at the brink of the river. And the ill-favored and lean-fleshed kine did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kine. So Pharaoh awoke, and he slept and dreamed the second time. And behold, 7 ears of corn came up from one stalk, rank and good. And behold, there were 7 thin ears, blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And it came to pass in the morning that the spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt, and all the wise men thereof, and Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto the Pharaoh. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. And Pharaoh was wroth with his servants, and put me in ward of the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker, and we dreamed a dream in one night, he and I. And we dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And there was there with us a young man, a Hebrew, a servant to the captain of the guard, and we told him. And he interpreted to us our dreams, each man according to his dreams did he interpret. And it came to pass as he interpreted to us, so it was. Me he restored into mine office, and him he hanged. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and he shaved himself and changed his raiment, and came in unto Pharaoh. Now I'll stop there for just a little bit, interrupt the story. First verse, and it came to pass at the end of 2 full years. So this is 2 years after Joseph has given the interpretation to the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. The butler has been restored. That's the chief butler, that's the food taster, this is a highly trusted man. And the baker, of course, kind of went the way of all flesh. So 2 years after that, Pharaoh has a dream, which doesn't trouble his sleep, but it troubles his waking time. Did you notice that? He has 2 dreams in one night. He dreams, goes back to sleep, has another dream. First one involved 7 fat cows and 7 thin cows. The thin cows eat up the fat cows. The second dream involves corn. Now this is not, Illini chief, this isn't golden bantam, retasseling sweet corn. This is grain, which in Elizabethan English they call corn. You have to remember, corn had not been brought back from the New World yet. So this is wheat, this is barley, this is oats. And you have 7 of those, which are good shape. And you have 7 which are blasted with the east wind. Notice the east wind? That's a wind from the desert. If you're in Egypt and you have a west wind, that's going to come in off the Mediterranean, and it will be a moist wind bringing moisture. East wind, it's going to be a dry wind coming out of the desert, and it will dehydrate anything in front of it. Pharaoh's troubled by this. We don't know why an individual dream would trouble him, but it says that he is troubled. And he does what troubled kings do when they're troubled by their own dreams. He sends for the magicians. He sends for the wise men. And he sent for them all. No exceptions. And it was kind of like the doctor who would say, can't do a thing for you. They have no more ability to interpret the dream than Pharaoh does himself. That prompts the memory of the butler. And the first thing he does is he confesses, I kind of overlooked something. Now, there is another time when a person with a gift for interpreting dreams is mentioned to a king. It happens with Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel.
Yeah.
Only that guy comes in after Daniel says, no, wait, why is the king so sleep? Well, he's always had this dream. He says, well, give me some time, we'll pray about this, we'll go in, see whether or not an interpretation is given to the king. He runs in and says, I have found the guy who can answer your problem. Well, no, he hadn't. Daniel had come to him. He hadn't found anybody. This guy comes, oh, I remembered that I forgot. Basically, that's what he's telling Pharaoh. And he explains, he gives a very clear history of what happened in that prison. So Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily. So the king apparently is deeply troubled by what he is seeing, wants to know what it means. And here's Daniel's response. He makes himself presentable in the Egyptian manner.
Daniel or Joseph?
Excuse me, Joseph. Joseph makes himself presentable in the Egyptian manner. Egyptians shaved their beards, the Egyptian men. Hebrews did not. As a matter of fact, for a mature Hebrew to be without a beard was a great disgrace. Do you remember when David's friends were sent back to him by the other king with their beards half shaved off? So they were going to have to shave the rest of it to make this thing look right. They also cut off the back of their tunic, which was a little embarrassing too. It was the beard was the big thing. And it was so humiliating that David said, you just stay over here now as a group so your beards regrow and then come back and it won't be a problem. But Joseph makes himself presentable in the Egyptian manner, puts his best foot forward. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. Notice his response. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me. Mm-hmm. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Now, what has Joseph just done?
Deflected the ability from himself to God.
He's saying, what I tell you is not an ability that lies within me. What else did he just say? God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. How does Joseph know that? Joseph knows something this book is not telling us. This is an affirmative
All
statement.
along, though, it's been that way.
Yeah, because he just got through saying, I don't have any interpretation here. It's not in me. But God will tell you, now, if it's me and I'm making a guess, I'd come in and I'd say, I'm kind of with the magicians. Now, God can do it, and I don't know whether he will or not.
But he knows he
No. This is an affirmative statement. He's going to do it. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, in my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of the river. I'm not going to read through all of this because this is almost a word-for-word restatement of the dream that he just had earlier. Yes, right.
So Joseph's now standing before Pharaoh, and he hasn't heard yet what Pharaoh saw in his vision, or dream. Not vision, but dream. There's a difference, right?
He hasn't heard it, but he may have seen it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the difference between vision and dream. I can't remember, Jay, you told us one time.
A vision is a dream you have while you're awake.
Okay, that's a vision.
Yes, a dream is a vision you have while you're asleep.
Asleep, okay, so he was interrupted during the day. He maybe had a nap or something, is that what? Not at night, right?
Oh, I'm guessing this is night.
Nighttime, a dream at night.
Two of them.
Oh, right.
One dream, he has, that's the one with the cows, wakes him up.
And so Joseph says, God's gonna give you an answer of peace even before he's heard the dream.
That is correct.
Okay, got it.
From
Now-
Pharaoh.
Is
From
it
Pharaoh.
of peace or kind of like to put you at peace?
It can be.
It's gonna give you an answer.
Yes, it can.
Not a good answer,
But
just
it's
a
the fact that an answer is definitely
coming, yes.
is what he's saying, and it's, he's stating it as a matter of fact.
Right, right.
I would not be able to do that,
Well, I mean,
unless God had already told me.
the thing is, the baker, he gave an answer. Was that an answer of peace? Well, it was peace because he knew the answer, but it wasn't
It wasn't,
literally
no.
actually a peaceful
And
interpretation.
you'll notice the language that Joseph is using with Pharaoh is not anywhere near the same kind of language he used with those other two servants. No, he's speaking to Pharaoh as a king. But he's speaking, this is the thing, he's already speaking to him with authority. God will.
Mm-hmm.
Try those words out sometime and see how far you get.
You mean if I say, jump up and say, God will?
Mhm.
Now, you know what that is?
What?
That is taking the name of the Lord thy God in vain.
Ooh.
That's what that is. We like to think it's that off-the-tongue curse word. Now, I'm not endorsing that. But to state in your own behalf and say, this God's going to, or God has told me, when he hasn't, that's using the name of the Lord in
Oh,
vain.
yeah.
You're invoking his authority.
Why would
Which
you
is
do
what
that?
which is what Joseph just did.
It-
He invoked God's authority, but he apparently has it.
But you said if in vain.
That's right, he's not doing it in vain.
No,
Watch
he
the
isn't.
story.
Okay.
Okay, so Pharaoh recounts the dreams. Joseph responds to hearing this again in 25, verse 25. And Pharaoh ends his account in verse 24 with, but there was none that could declare it unto me. That's, he's talking about those magicians and the wise men. All right. Joseph said unto Pharaoh, once again, notice this, there's no prayer. Joseph is not praying about this. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the first thing they do is they go into a prayer meeting. There's no prayer here. The response is immediate. Joseph says unto Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. So yeah, you had a dream, you woke up, you had another dream, it's one dream. That's the first thing he tells you. God hath, that's past tense, shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. Now we're getting into the realm of prophecy, and I want us to pay very close attention to what goes on here. The seven kind are 7 years. Who would make that connection? 7 cows in 7 years. Mighty good guess if it's right.
What'd you say?
Who would make that connection of 7 cows in 7 years?
Apparently only Joseph,
Apparently.
Through God.
Yeah.
because none of his magicians knew.
On your own.
And you have to
Yeah, I
remember,
see what you- I see what
he is in Egypt who abhor herdsmen. That's the first part of the dream. Cows, Pharaoh,
Oh.
get used to it.
I did not know that. Why did they abhor herdsmen?
They were an intellectual people. They were a scientific people. They
Oh,
were a very
okay.
religious people. And, well,
Huh.
and to give you an idea, at about this time, well, just a little bit before this time in Egyptian history, it was the Egyptian astronomers and mathematicians who first determined the distance between the earth and the sun, and they were correct. 93 million miles, give or take. They're the ones who established it. They also had invented a polytheistic religion that put Greek and Roman mythology to shame. They systematized religion like you couldn't believe, but they believed it. They were so careful about that and the consolidation of that religious system that if you were going to learn engineering, mathematics, chemistry, architecture, any of what we would call the sciences, you had to go to the priests to be taught it. They were also the educators. So later in Exodus, when it tells us that that Moses was learned in all of the science, of Egypt,
Yeah.
you know where he got it,
Yeah.
those priests. Okay. The 7 good kine are 7 years, the 7 good ears are 7 years, the dream is 1. And the 7 thin kine and ill-favored kine that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. Who's speaking now? It's Joseph, isn't it? That I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt, and there shall arise after them 7 years of famine. And all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land, and the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine. As great as that multiple harvests are going to be, they're going to forget about it because how great the famine is going to be. And for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. Does that make sense? If you double something twice, now what's your number?
14. It'd be 14 years.
No, it'd be 4.
4.
Well, you're taking the number 7.
Yeah.
No, he's talking about the dream, which is
Oh.
and he says
Okay.
it's doubled, so that's 2 dreams, right?
2 witnesses.
Yeah, well, and then it says, for that the dream is doubled unto Pharaoh twice. So you take the 2, you double that again. There are actually 2 kinds of cattle, fat and thin. There are 2 kinds of ears of corn, robust and blasted. That's 4. Okay, now, this is what he says. And for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice, it is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Now he's really putting himself on the hook. Now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. A 5th part of a year, and you're going to have 7 years of famine. Does the math work? But it works this way. Those years of that multitudinous harvest will be so great that a 5th part of it will carry him through that famine. The fat years are fatter than the thin years will be thin. But if you're starving to death, it doesn't matter, what granddad had. It's, what you're doing now. But there will be enough to carry them over if, in fact, Joseph is telling the truth. Let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn in the hand of Pharaoh. Notice that. Not in Pharaoh's officers, in the hand of Pharaoh. Oh, I lost my place.
35.
Okay, yes, and let them gather and then lay it up in the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. We're not going to have on-farm storage here. We're going to bring this to the cities. And that food shall be for storage in the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. The thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants.
But why?
Well, if you look at the narrative and forget the symbolism for a minute, it makes perfect sense. You got 7 cows, you got 7 years, you got cows that get skinny, you have a multiple harvest that gets blasted. It makes sense with what Pharaoh has told his dream to be. What Daniel has going for him, not only that interpretation, but he says it's immediate, and basically it begins now. There's some urgency to this.
You mean Joseph?
And when you don't know what to do, anything that sounds plausible will look very good. And you want to be careful of that kind of a trap, particularly when you're dealing with prophecy.
Say
And we'll
that
see
again.
how. If you don't know what to do,
Okay,
And they don't.
I'm stumped.
yeah, and along comes somebody and gives you a plausible story, it's gonna look good to you, because you don't have one.
I don't got an answer to this, and this is a real pressing.
This is a real pressing one.
But how does he know that it is, Jay? Pharaoh. I know, so he's had this dream.
Twice.
Yeah.
He's the one who called for the magicians, and he knew that everybody working for him couldn't give him an answer right or wrong. Here's a guy who comes up and says, the answers are not mine, they belong to God, and here it is.
Get ready.
Yeah. Now, if you put yourself in Pharaoh's position, or all of your people, and remember, he's not Egyptian.
Yeah,
He
that's
doesn't
right.
know
That's
if
right.
he can even trust these people.
Yeah.
And here comes this guy and says,
A Hebrew.
A Hebrew.
And this Pharaoh was from,
North of Palestine, well, his people were.
yeah,
North of Palestine, probably. Somewhere, we'd say, modern day Syria. They arranged that far north, the Hyksos. And all the way down to Egypt, which they
so
took over for
historically
about
and
600
everything like that, he sees the connection between God and the Hebrews. Is that a fair?
He is about to.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
All right,
But it's not like he's,
Potiphar does,
Huh?
Potiphar does,
Yeah.
and Pharaoh's captain of the guard does.
Yeah.
Okay?
but it's not like the land's suffering right now, if
No,
that's
it's
what
not.
you're thinking. The only person that's suffering is Pharaoh, because he's troubled because of the
Dream.
dream.
Dream that he had that
Exactly.
nobody else had.
Right,
All right.
but he's in a win-win. I mean,
So what
We have
difference
a-
does it make?
We have a great big bountiful harvest and we put a fifth of it aside, that's good. I mean, it's not like he's out anything,
Exactly.
so
He can't get hurt by following this.
doing what he's gonna do.
Other than the fact that the food that he takes up in the fat years, don't forget this, Pharaoh purchases. This is money out of pocket.
Mm.
The Hyksos are shepherd kings. They're not commercial people. So he's stacking, as we would say, a lot of chips on what Joseph is telling him. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? There's your recognition. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, for as much as God hath showed thee all this, who showed what to whom? According to Pharaoh, God showed it to Joseph, not to Pharaoh, showed it to Joseph. Because God has showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, see, I have set thee over the land of Egypt. Accomplished fact. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it upon Joseph's hand, arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, with a gold chain about his neck. He made him to ride in the second chariot which he had, and they cried before him, bow the knee. And he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. Joseph says it now, it's going to happen. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zanath-Paneah, and he gave him to wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, a priest of On. It makes it sound like he's a priest of a named god. That's not what this is saying. On is a city. It is the religious center, the cultural center, and if you want to place it in Egypt, it's about 10 miles to the north. It's a suburb, actually, of modern-day Cairo. That's where it's at. And that's where it was then. So he's got a wife, he's got a Pharaoh who's backing his play, and he is the son-in-law of a priest. Now I want you to notice the political strategy of Pharaoh, who is not an Egyptian. He gives the wife of a priest who is an Egyptian to a Hebrew who is not an Egyptian, but is related to him. Now do you see the role of matrimony in politics? We saw it before in the building of families, and the selection of wives and so forth and so on. Now you're seeing it in politics. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. And Joseph was 30 years old. So that means the rest of the text is correct, and I believe it is, he has been in Egypt almost as long as his life was before he was stolen. 4 years difference is all.
Yeah.
And the first 4 years of your life is not really very meaningful. You know, other than, you know, personal grooming, toilet training, and a few other little tricks that mom usually teaches their children. The formative years are about as long in each place. 30 years before he stood before Pharaoh. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt, and in the 7 plenteous years the earth brought forth by handfuls. That would, you'd say like a heaping double handful is what this means.
Say that again.
It's like a heaping double handful, huge amount. You're expecting a tablespoon, you get a double handful. The 7 plenteous years the earth brought forth by handfuls. He gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities. The food of the field, which was round about every city, laid up in the same. So the suburbs of the city and the rural areas that surround the city, that stuff is stored in the cities that it does surround, no matter where you are in Egypt.
So
And
now then Pharaoh got a fifth of this and put in
he
his
buys it.
barn or whatever.
Yeah, and he builds the granaries to hold it. Joseph does all of this. And Joseph gathered corn in this as the sand of the sea. That just means an innumerable amount. Very much until he left numbering, for it was without number. And unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On, bare unto him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God, said he, hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. Forget his father's house? He's not forgetting. He's forgetting the pain of leaving it. That's what that is. He never forgets his father. And he certainly never forgets Benjamin.
No.
And the name of the second called he Ephraim, for God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. Well, he's not in affliction now, but he was. So he's not going to remember the past affliction of Egypt and forget the past good of his father's house, now is he? No, he's not. So you want to be careful with how he's wording this and how we accept it. And the reason I'm saying be careful, because we're going to go back and look at this prophecy again. And that's where you got to really, really, really be careful. Genesis is a book of one beginning, Frank, and many firsts. And God is about ready to show us what you do with apocalyptic, revelatory literature. His word set in prophecy by symbol. Those cows are symbols. Those ears are symbols. That east wind is a symbol. All of that is a symbol, which Joseph interprets correctly. And the 7 years of dearth began to come according as Joseph had said, and the dearth was in all the lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. Now there's your distinction. There's food in Egypt. There isn't anywhere else. It's running out. And all the land of Egypt was famished, and the people cried unto Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, go unto Joseph. What he saith to you, do. And all the famine was over the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses and gave. So he's selling. This is Pharaoh's steward. Pharaoh bought all that stuff. Joseph is not going to give it away. He's selling. But now look what he's selling it at. Greatly inflated prices. This is making a fortune for Pharaoh. So who's he going to thank for that? Joseph. Now eventually, however much or however little he's getting for the sale of the grain is going to be immaterial. This is not Joseph gouging somebody simply because he can. This is not Pharaoh gouging anybody simply because he can, because Pharaoh is not aware of what's going on. You go to Joseph and do what he says to do, and I'm okay with that. He's just like Potiphar, and he's just like the captain of the guard. After Joseph takes control, he doesn't know what's going on in his own house. All he knows is this being greatly blessed, and he's not going to question it. He's not even going to count it. And all the countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, because that the famine was so sore in all the lands. I'll give you a modern day example of how this works. We all know about the Federal Emergency Petroleum Reserve, where they store the oil in the salt domes. And you remember when President Trump pumped out of that reserve into basically the market to stabilize the price. And I forget how many million barrels we did. And then, of course, he's faced with the issue of resupplying the reserve. Well, you remember the great recession that we came out of just prior to that? You know what the value of that petroleum had done in the meantime? It had dropped. He was able to replace it
With zero.
Yes, as a matter of fact, it was a moneymaker for the federal government, and everybody backing up to a pump saved money too. This is what is going on with food, not petroleum, food, same way.
Same tie.
Mhm. Now,
You know,
yeah,
this was a lot of grain, because in 49, when he said they just quit counting it, because it was without number. And the New Living translates that 49 as stop keeping records because there was too much to measure. They just measured the distance to the sun with 19.3 million miles and could do it.
and this is.
They didn't have a number for the grain that was being
And
collected.
this
Yeah,
is
you
the people who
never
invented
thought about
numbers.
Right on.
Exactly.
So you can imagine now, look at the manifestation of that interpretation.
Good point.
Double handful.
Thought
brought
about that.
forth. Here's Joseph, who says, it's gonna be 7 years of famine, but all you're really gonna need is 20%, 1/5, and it'll be more than carry you through. Plus, we're going to be selling at market prices to anybody that comes down to Egypt. See, that's where the money was made.
That's it.
Yes, I
I think
think that.
that's what really sold this whole thing to Pharaoh in the first place, was not only did he interpret the dream, he gave him a complete plan of how to manage it.
And Pharaoh did just exactly what Henry Kaiser did during World War II, when he realized he was not capable of figuring out a way of providing the Liberty ships and providing those landing craft. And he says, do you know what I did? I hired brains and I hired them cheap. That's exactly what Pharaoh's doing. And then, this is where Pharaoh's genius was. He had either the brains or to know not to let his ego get in the way, step out of the way and let the man who knows do it. And that's exactly what Pharaoh does. He doesn't even have an answer to give his own people. Give us bread. I'm gotta go to Joseph. King's Road. As a matter of fact, I'm going down this afternoon with a couple of baskets for the household. Basically, it's what's going on. And this is not being lost on Pharaoh. But let's go back and look now what you have in these dreams before. And you think of a symbolic dream that has been shown to us in Genesis. Think of the dreams and visions that these patriarchs have had.
Well, Jacob, I would guess. I would think Jacob would be one.
What do you see?
Well, he saw the angel, I guess, showed him.
The ladder.
Huh? Yeah, the ladder. Yeah.
And the ladder was a symbol of? We're looking for symbols here.
Oh,
He saw a stairway with God standing above the stairway and angels walking up and down the stairway.
Right.
So
Exactly.
the stairway symbolizes what?
Communication between him and God, I guess, if that's, I don't know what you're wanting, I guess, Jay.
There isn't one given. It was what he saw.
Which-
It was a stairway. Angels going up and down.
Yeah.
Needs no interpretation. He was there. They're coming down to him. And God's standing at the top and speaks.
Up and down.
The angels are going up and down.
Yeah.
God is standing here and God speaks directly. That needs no interpretation, does it? This needs an interpreter. This is all symbols. You got cows, you got corn. The fact that it's by the river is there. The east wind is indicated. Now, the reason why I say you have to be careful, because God has only one way of interpreting his word, and that is by bringing it to pass.
You're right.
There is only one way that he brings a manifestation of prophecy, and that is in the physical, in real time, no matter how far ahead the prophecy is given. It's about, what is it? What do you suppose the time difference was between Eden and Calvary? Because it's in Eden where God says to the serpent,
Yeah, that's
you'll bruise
right.
his heel, but
Yeah.
he's going to crush your head. See how long that took to happen? Now, just because it happens in the physical doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be recognized as the Word of God being made manifest. How many people in Jerusalem realized they were manifesting the Word of God when they drove the nails? Caiaphas sure didn't know. Annas didn't know. His own disciples didn't know. Mary may have. Hard to tell. There was a lot she pondered in her heart that nobody else heard. She is also the only one who had the prophecy from Anna that a sword shall pierce thine own soul also. She knew something was coming here. How much they saw, I never will say what a prophet sees. I don't know. But this word is telling us they see it in ways we don't. Because Joseph didn't have the dream. Joseph is given an interpretation of a dream. And the interpretation is God's. There's the question. Do not interpretations belong to God? Answer, yes, and exclusively.
Right.
So Joseph knows, as he's speaking these words, that this is a prophecy of God. Now, and he gives the interpretation immediately, both when he's in the prison with the two guys, and immediately to Pharaoh, right there. Now, Pharaoh, all he has to do is listen to that, because the good years come first. He's not losing anything, by going down this route. Now, if the famine came first and Pharaoh hesitates, now he's be a little bit of a box. God's being very, very generous to Pharaoh. You get the good part first to prove that judgment's coming. And he tells us the same thing. Tells us that in Daniel, tells us that in Revelation, tells us that in Jeremiah, tells us that in Isaiah. It's all through the Gospels. But I want you, because the reason why I'm taking a little time with this today is I want you to approach those other books in the way that Joseph teaches us to approach Revelation by vision and dream. He tells them what it means. He tells them how it will manifest. The fat cows are great years. The fat ears are great years. The skinny cows, which devour the fat cows but don't get fat, are because the famine will eat everything that was before it, to the extent that you won't even remember the good years. And he does the same thing with the years. Tells them how many years it's going to be. And he also did the same thing with the branches on the vine, the number of baskets in the dreams before, those were days. Who knows that a basket of bread is a day? I'm going to be mixing those up. Joseph knows they are days, and he's not hesitant to tell them. And they're in a position, both the butler and the baker, whether they believe or not, they're going to find out one way or another. Now, there are people who will tell you that prophecy depends upon your believing it. No, it doesn't. The working out of prophecy is like an interpretation of a dream. It is God's alone, and whether I believe it or not is not going to inhibit God with what he says, is it? Now you see how he's turned it around. Pharaoh has the responsibility or the opportunity to believe or not.
Right.
But look what's handed him. Or even if you don't, even if you doubt, Even if you can't trust Joseph, the 7 years of good effort, what's it gonna hurt you to take 20%? It's not gonna hurt him a bit. He's got the money to do it.
Yeah.
And Joseph's explaining to him how he's gonna get it back, and more. Makes it pretty easy for Pharaoh, doesn't it? Should be easy for us, isn't it? How difficult do you think it was for Joseph to speak that word? Because he hasn't seen 1 year of those 14 yet, not
I was
one
gonna
day of
say,
it.
he was taking a,
Leap of faith.
yeah, certainly
It's
was.
faith. I don't believe he leaps. I believe he stood there and accepted it.
Right, but even, yeah, he had to have faith to do it.
This is not throwing out a fleece.
So,
He repeats the word of God.
So
That's huge.
does Joseph have like an additional? Well, it's obvious he has an additional word from the Lord, because nowhere in there does a fifth of a cow get cut apart
No.
and set aside,
Right.
or a
No.
fifth of the grain. So how's he know a fifth, and how's he know that, I mean, so
Right.
God's telling Joseph more
oh, yes.
than what
He
Pharaoh got in a dream.
Well, if you go back and
Exactly.
you look earlier in the story, I think you'll notice that, when he's taken down to Egypt, it says, but God was with Joseph.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Oh, boy, was he with Joseph.
Mhm.
And I don't think he's a silent partner. But if you take that off, the direct revelation of God to Joseph himself, let's remember who Joseph is. Who is his great grandfather?
Abraham. Must be Abraham. No,
Yeah,
that'd be
it's-
his great-great-grandfather.
Great.
Oh, just great.
Abraham,
Yeah,
Isaac
great,
his
and
grandpa,
Isaac, and then
Jacob,
yeah.
Okay.
Great. Yeah.
Now, Abraham is told directly by God, your seed will go, into another country whom they will serve for 400 years. Now, do you think he just kept that to himself?
Oh, no.
No, Isaac knew it, Jacob knows it. Jacob has 12 sons, of whom Joseph is one, and he's very close to Joseph. Probably shared more with Joseph than he had the opportunity with the older ones, because they're out with the sheep.
Right.
He is also aware enough that although he rebuked Joseph for telling about the dream that he had with the sun, the moon, and the stars, it says he observed the saying. Because he knows how the story's gonna work out,
Yeah, yeah.
all right?
So,
Joseph knows too. And for all Joseph knows, this is the beginning of a much longer prophecy. Not 14 years, 450.
Right. Because really, he's not making Pharaoh rich. He's making Israel
Israel
rich.
stinking rich again. Because they're gonna come out with all the wealth of Egypt. Now, how much of that Joseph is told, I don't know. But I do know this, he's told things we're not told, because when you go to the end of the book, and Joseph is dying, and this is confirmed in the 11th chapter of Hebrews, he tells his brethren, you will go back, you will go up, and don't leave my bones here.
Yeah.
You know, we
Right,
took, we
take
took,
with it,
you know,
yeah.
the patriarch Jacob, we took him up and buried him. He doesn't say where to bury him, he just says, get
Don't
me
leave
out
me
of here.
here.
Take him home.
Yeah, take me home. And he's buried in Shechem, which is the ground that Jacob bought, and Jacob gives to Joseph above and beyond the portion of the estate. So that's his by inheritance, the only part of the land he has by inheritance, by the way.
So the what to do, the 20% and all that, Pharaoh had the dream, he didn't know what it was, but in the interpretation of the dream, which belongs to God, God gave him the interpretation, and what we're saying is, take the 1/5 and do this with it as part of the revelation that God gave to Joseph. And
Yeah,
what-
'cause, yeah.
The what to do, the what to do, here's the answer
It'd have to be.
of the dream, but here's a solution to the problem that
Now, Joseph has learned a couple of things, and I'm just gonna point this out as a matter of pure conjecture. I'm not saying this is what's going on in the book of Genesis, but I'm telling you, the book of Genesis gives plenty of room for this. Joseph has learned a lesson about flapping your gums every time you have a vision or a dream. It got him sold into Egypt. Now, I don't know what visions, God, and dreams that God is giving him in the meantime that he may be saying not one word about to Pharaoh to anybody else.
He had 2 years, Jay. But after
Yeah.
his the interpretation that he gave these interpretations, they came true. He has 2 years to either mull on that or the Lord talking to him or what I'm saying. There's got to have been something for those in those 2 years.
Well, and when we say the Lord talking to him,
Well, I'm
let's
sorry.
just back up a minute
Yeah.
because I'm not going to rule that out. It's altogether possible. Joseph has exhibited all of the prophetic tests and has passed them, but this book does not name him as a prophet.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't say that about Jacob. In as close as you get is in the book of Hebrews when it says, "By faith they said." Well, that's what a prophet does. By revelation he
Right.
speaks. That's a prophet. And the fact that what they spoke came to pass just as they spoke it is the Deuteronomy 18 test of a prophet speaking with the authority of God. Joseph doesn't call himself a prophet. God does not record that title in the book for him. But nobody has a biography in this book that even rivals Joseph
Right.
until the appearance of the Christ of God. Now, there is your prophet. Yeah. Now, we're going to begin to see further ahead in Scripture, not just in this book, and I'm watching this time very carefully. The difference between the visions that are given, dreams that are given, and then what we call apocalyptic, revelatory prophecy in symbol. Now you'll see that largely in Daniel as it begins to, and it comes to full power in John's revelation in the New Testament. And this is why I'm saying be very, 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 very careful. How many cows did Pharaoh dream of? 14. So, here's what would happen if that interpretation were given now. You'd have every religious spirit in Egypt going out looking for a herd of 14 cows. And who knows, they might find them.
Exactly.
Books
Exactly.
written about
And old books written about them, there'll be
Bible
videos.
studies, bookmarks.
And they would have missed the thing they were supposed to do, which was store a little grain. They're going to be out counting cows when they should be or they'll be in search of. What we're doing now is we're doing everything we can to identify the beast and the Antichrist and the false prophet, and we're going to narrow it down to a person, a name, and a place, and a number, or a shot. See how silly that is? Now, I'm not going to tell you that Revelation doesn't manifest physically. It absolutely will, and it absolutely will in real time. But that second coming in judgment is going to happen the same way the first coming in that swaddling clothes was, and that is nobody knew it but Mary. I mean, some shepherds showed up afterward because they were told. They didn't see a vision. Isaiah saw the vision. A virgin shall conceive. Well, what does that mean? For unto us a child is born, unto us. That's the nation. Well, the nation produces the Messiah, but does not bring him forth. Why? It could have been anybody's daughter. It could have been mine. It could have been yours. It could have been, and everybody wanted it to be. Everybody was looking for that. Wait for God to interpret apocalypse. If you have a prophet among you, he'll tell you what those visions are and when they start, because this gives us the model. The good years come first, the judgment comes second, and it starts now. And it either happened or it didn't, and if that first harvest wasn't a bumper harvest, his career with Pharaoh would have been over like that.
You've talked about, but these people that he had in before him, these magicians, they could have given him something some interpretation. Like now, if that had happened, you'd have somebody interpreting it other than
Well, that's
Joseph.
what I'm doing.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's a
So
difference
now
between
it's
then and
even
now.
worse.
He had some honest crooks working for him.
Yeah.
And don't think that because they're magicians, this is some kind of Cub Scout code writing. No, these are magicians. When Moses confronts the magicians, let's not forget, they could do the first 3 signs that Moses had. They
Yeah.
could throw down their sticks and they
Exactly.
could turn serpents and they
Exactly.
could turn water to blood. They couldn't turn it back though, could they?
Exactly.
So don't kid yourself, they have access to the spirit realm. They may not understand it. Moses may not have understood it, but God does, and God can make that distinction pretty quick, and then pretty soon he just cuts them off. It's dark in Egypt, but it's light in Goshen, see? Now, this business about talking with God, this is the way that I look at it, whether or not this was going on with Joseph. Anybody written a Bible lately? I put my hand down too. Anybody have full waking lately?
Say what?
Fully awake? Anybody lately had a vision so real you could walk into it yourself? How about a dream that real? That you remembered in absolute detail and could tell somebody else about and hold those details so clear in your mind that you knew whether or not his interpretation clicked with something he never saw. That hasn't happened to me lately, and I doubt that it's happened to anybody in this room. Now that's God speaking. That's what it is. But I'm going to ask you something. Are we also going to say that God does not speak to us?
No.
The same God. That because I don't have a vision or a dream that he does not speak to me?
He's there.
He speaks.
Of course he's there. And that word is eternal. It's eternal.
Mm-hmm.
And just because I don't understand the prophecy doesn't mean that God is unable to reveal it. He's promised the Spirit to do that in his time for his purposes in our life. And Joseph was, not only did he in faith give commandment about those bones, he had the patience to stand there until God gave it to him. Because before this time, those 2 sons are born. Look at those names again. God has made me forget. God has made me fruitful. How fruitful is he? Come on, he's in prison. He's got 2 boys.
Yeah.
Wonder how many Pharaoh's got. No, he stood there in patience, and that's a big part. That's a big part of faith. Is waiting for God to reveal it. And this is what I want to reinforce. Faith is not the strength with which you hold to the Word of God. Faith is the revelation of the Word of God. That's all it is. It's not how much I believe, how strong I believe, because see, then it's not God, it's me, isn't it? And I'm supposed to be able to build up these faith muscles? Oh, I haven't got any. But God has given unto us, his church as a group, as his body, and unto us as individual members, the capacity to receive the faith that is himself doing the work in you. You're supposed to be a good neighbor. That isn't in you to be a good neighbor, but it's in him to be that through you. See what I mean? And he speaks to us with the same authority and the same truth and the same eternality that he spoke to Joseph and to Pharaoh by Joseph. But here's the big difference. It was spoken unto Pharaoh by Joseph. And God gives Joseph the credit. Joseph told it. In the life of a believer, it is God speaking from within to the rest of the world. We're called to be light. We're called to be salt. We're candlesticks. We're lampstands. From the Gospels to Revelation, that's what we're supposed to be. And it's not our light.
No.
We're just supposed to stand there and let it happen. And Joseph is giving us that model. And these were written for our example our admonition. Now, we see the good example, we're gonna see some admonitions about some bad acting when the brothers get down there, and that's gonna happen in, the 42nd chapter, God willing, next week. Question, comments? Oh, come on, there's gotta be, yes,
Just one, the contrast.
then why don't you hold up 5 fingers?
Okay, just one. The contrast between when Nebuchadnezzar demanded the magicians or whatever not only interpret his dream but tell it to him. He wouldn't even tell him. Daniel was given all of that information. So the contrast between Pharaoh actually giving him the dream and Nebuchadnezzar saying, "No, you tell me what it is." It just, that's one of those little contrasts in there, the level.
Well, yes, and what happens under Nebuchadnezzar, it's funny how, to me, how different scriptures jive with that. Now, and I've been saying it for the last couple of weeks, be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever man soweth that will he also reap. Well, the whole business about the sorcerers and the magicians and the astrologers and all that Nebuchadnezzar gets up, that's the whole Babylonian system, at which he sets at the top, and he can't trust it. So he says, oh, I'm sorry, I can't remember the dream. He showed me the dream, give me an interpretation. And God says, bring it on. I got my guy, let's see yours do it first. You set the terms, let the Babylonians do it. Then we're gonna bring out my guy. And yeah, I find that so sarcastic. Don't kid yourself, he's a loving God. But he is an in-your-face God. And every now and then, his word is, oh yeah, and it brings on a flood. It brings on Sodom. It brings on the fire on Sodom and Gomorrah. Oh yeah? Because he already told once, and all he's gonna say it is once, my spirit will not always strive with man. Eventually, you'll get it your own way, and you ain't gonna like it when it comes. Any other, but yes, you're right, that's a big difference. No other
I just
comments,
have
no
to
other
laugh
questions?
because those are the first grain silos that are mentioned.
And maybe the first elevators. Maybe the first grain elevators.
Yeah.
They were a smart, a clever race. Rick, while you're up, would you close in prayer for us?
Sure.